Hey there. Have you ever heard or thought that, hey, divorce is no big deal. The kids will be fine. In fact, they'll actually be better off if we get divorced because I'll be happier. And I'm going to tell you that's really BS. I'm Leslie Dories, your marriage coach and creator of the Hero Husband Project and owner of Foundations Coaching. And the truth of the matter is, even if your children are grown and out of the house, your divorce is impactful to them. I had a client many years ago. She was 27 when she came to me, and she and her parents had just decided to get divorced, and her response was, "My whole childhood was a lie." Now, there are some times when children do better once their parents get divorced, and those are in the situations where there is high conflict. There's lots of arguing, fighting, maybe physical abuse, and the children and that kind of tension, that kind of situation is incredibly detrimental for children. And so the research shows that when that divorce happens and the children then are living in a much calmer environment, they do better. It's the actual conflict that creates a problem. One of my really good friends remembers telling her parents that they should just get divorced because they were fighting all the time. And what she learned later was she didn't really want them to get divorced. She just wanted them to stop fighting. And that makes perfect sense. And it's and if your situation is not volatile and you get divorced, there really is an impact on the children. And I find it really interesting that we do so many things to protect our children physically. We put them in car seats. We do these things. We make them wear bike helmets and knee and elbow pads and all of these things to keep them safe because we don't want them injured in a car accident. And and I get that. If so, we try not to drive into things, but we don't take the same actions when we're talking about giving them this emotional safety. And what children want, what they want more than anything, is a safe, secure place to be. And and they're not intimately involved in your relationship. They experience it, especially if there's tension, because they're highly tuned in to the emotional environment. And depending on their ages, they can't necessarily make sense of it, but they know it's there. But a lot of the times, one of the things that I get from my clients is, well, we're like roommates. We're good at co-parenting, but we're not romantically connected anymore. Um, and so those relationships that I just described, those are the ones that can be reignited. Those are the ones that can be made whole with a little bit of tweaking and support and education. And even if you and your partner fight, there are ways to productively deal with differences. I do not buy into irreconcilable differences. There are a few things that are truly irreconcilable. I want children, you don't. That is truly irreconcilable. I want to sell all my worldly possessions and wander the world, and you want a house with a white picket fence and a normal 9 to 5 job. Those may be irreconcilable, but most of what's going on between a couple is not irreconcilable. It's more, you just don't know how to reconcile it. And you keep doing the same spinning, and you don't get anywhere, so you think the only other option is to end it. But your children will pay the price. If you are a child of divorce, you know what I'm talking about. My parents' disruption and divorce and whatever lasted for a long time. I became aware of the difficulties when I was 8, and they finally divorced when I was 15, both remarried the divorce was final in December when I turned 16, and both of my parents were remarried by Christmas. Believe me, that was a lot. And your children are the ones who pay the price. They're usually the ones bouncing back and forth between your homes. They're the ones who have to be careful because most of the time, your divorce is one-sided. One of you wants it, and the other one is kind of forced to accept it. Many years ago, I knew this young woman whose parents were divorced. Her dad had moved on, and 20 years after the divorce, the mother was still caught up in the hurt and the drama and the this. Her ex had moved on. The daughter was trying to move on. And so this is the problem. People see divorce as the solution. And if you have children, you really can't get divorced. If you don't have kids, you can walk away from each other, never see each other again, never have to deal with each other. Great. But that's not what happens with most cases. If you have children, they are still caught in the middle. And by the way, they were never consulted. And as I said before, they're the ones carrying the burden. And if you really want to protect your children, because a lot of cases when I talk to people who've gotten divorced, it's like, well, did you ever get any help? Well, no. Or we went to see a therapist and we went for 2 sessions and then it didn't work. Okay. So, I just have a really hard time with that. That is not putting forth, if you really want to protect your children, if you really want to make sure that they're safe, then you will deal with this because they will carry what they learned from you into their relationships. I know that I did for a long time until I figured out what I was doing was not helpful. But children of divorce tend to have one of 2 reactions. I will never get married because it doesn't work. Or if I get married, I will never get divorced. Doesn't necessarily mean that they won't, that they will get help. But we tend to have these extreme examples. And, your children can survive a car wreck, but you don't purposely drive them into the wall at 60 miles an hour. You will do everything you can to protect them. And what I'm telling you is children do better from a healthy, intact home, family home. Now, sometimes that's not possible. There are some real cases when divorce is absolutely essential. But most of the time, that is not the case. And we're lying to ourselves when we say, oh, the kids will be fine. Well, define fine. And, they don't necessarily get a good example of what a healthy relationship is because they haven't seen one and they're going to repeat what you've done, which, by the way, you probably repeated what your parents did. And we're now on 2nd and 3rd generation divorces. It's become acceptable. I don't think we want to put divorce back in the never can have it category. I wish it were a little bit more challenging for people to get and that people truly understood that your children aren't always going to be able to tell you what's going on because either they don't know or they don't want to add to the pain. So they just go, okay, but they're the ones literally who are dealing with a lot of the fallout. So love to hear your opinion about this. It's probably not going to be a popular one, and I'm really okay with that. If you're interested in actually putting your marriage back on the right track so that divorce is not something that is a real option, then I invite you to get in touch. You can send me an email. You can put a direct message down below. You can put a comment to say, hey, just give me, just contact me. I'm happy to help. It's what I do. And like I said, I understand people see that things have to stay as is or we have to end it. I'm telling you, there's a third way to see how it can be made better. I'd love it if you subscribed to the channel. I would love it if you'd share this video. I would love to hear your comments, positive or not. And until next week, stay loving.